Hello, and thanks again for tuning in to Across the 616, a podcast dedicated to the Marvel Champions Living card game produced by Fantasy Flight Games. This is part 3 of episode 1, and I'd suggest checking out parts 1 and 2 before going ahead and listening to this part. But here's a quick recap of what's happened so far. Our special guest on this first episode is a prominent member of the Marvel Champions Discord and Board Game Geek forums by the name of Earth Dragon. He set himself a goal of playing through the Rise of Red Skull campaign with each hero and its least used aspect, as per the playthrough stats from Board Game Geek. These playthrough stats are linked in the description below. He kindly agreed to come on the show and across 2 mammoth recording sessions spoke to us about his experience, shared his deck lists, and gave us something of a primer for taking on this epic challenge while only using one playset of each card released so far. In part 1, we covered Black Panther Justice, Black Widow Leadership, and Captain America Aggression. In part 2, we checked out Captain Marvel Protection, Doctor Strange Aggression, and Hawkeye Protection. In this part, we'll be looking at Hulk Justice, Iron Man Leadership, Ms. Marvel Justice, and She-Hulk Protection. I have to once again apologise as the audio on my end is still far below where I'd like it to be, and I am desperately trying to sort this out for an improved listening experience going forward. I appreciate everyone's support and patience in the matter. Anyway, I hope you enjoy part 3 of our episode 1 mega primer on the neglected list versus the Rise of Red Skull. So next up we have Hulk Justice. Now, to begin with, I can see why this is not very heavily played. It feels like, first of all, it's not an overly fun deck or interesting deck to play. It also, Justice as an aspect, just doesn't seem to solve a lot of Hulk's issues.
Well, like I was saying last time, it might solve some of the issues because he has a 0 thwart, but his deck is so demanding on that physical resource. There's this major lack of that resource within the Justice aspect right now. And it is because, partially because it has the smallest pool of cards. So you don't have a lot of options to go after. There's a couple big hitters. Concussive Blow is that has a physical resource, and the Beat Cop has a physical resource, and it's right on that curve that Hulk is going to play a lot of the time, where he uses all his other 3 cards obviously to play the 4th one, because both of those are 3 cost cards. But yeah, you don't have a lot of those cleanup options, or if several minions come out, if you have to deal with multiple cards at the same time. There is some things that you got to watch out for to try to make it work. I am not a huge proponent of tenacity. I think most players avoid it. This is one area where you'd probably want to equip a tenacity. You give yourself that fallback, both one, if you have multiple minions on the table, so you can knock them out and not be double engaged. And if you get stunned or exhausted or anything like that, right? Because we are playing on expert here, and just the card exhaustion itself can show up and completely blow your turn. So if you have that tenacity sitting out there, it makes it to where you can still do something.
Yeah,
So this is.
I
Go ahead.
definitely did notice that in your list, the tenacity, and thought that was a really good way to deal with the fact that Hulk over versus a lot of other characters really doesn't like getting exhausted going into his turn or being stunned. It kind of kills off your momentum, really, especially in the mid to late game.
Yeah. One benefit here. So Hulk is the one guy I did not beat the campaign with. I lost on Red Skull, and I guess I just spoiled the fact that I beat it with everybody else, because you only get one shot on Red Skull, right? Either you win or you lose. But the one benefit he does have in the campaign is he does get afforded on a couple of those scenarios a setup turn, which he can really, really use. At this stage, I think 3 enhanced physiques is vital. I get that under a lot of circumstances, you are just trading 3 resources one turn for 3 resources another turn. But again, with Hulk, he really needs that, and he can really use that. What are you going to do if you draw both your Hulk smashes in the same turn? It's nice to use them, and very rarely you're going to have the resources in hand to do it. I've heard of the fabled double limitless strength, double Hulk smash in the same draw. I'm sure it's happened to guys who have played 100 or so games with Hulk, but you can't really rely on that. So yeah, having those enhanced physiques out and being able to subsidize that. Helicarriers are huge. I put 2 in there just to make sure that even after you use the first one, right, it's still a physical resource. So it's the only thing I had a double on. And honestly, I put it in interrogation room to try to handle the thwarting. So if somebody came out, then I didn't have to worry about trying to thwart quite as often. It's not the best card in the world, but it helps with him. It helps in his situation. So Daredevil conveniently is a physical resource too, and it's very much convenient because you don't always have 4 resources to use to play somebody. So there's going to be plenty of situations and scenarios where you've got to check them for a resource because you can't always control what you draw at the start. Heck, a funny story is the one time I started with 2 enhanced physiques in my hand after the mulligan and thought, okay, I'm playing Absorbing Man or Taskmaster, who I wasn't sure who was exactly who I was playing, but it was one of those guys where I could afford a turn. I put both of them out thinking, yeah, I'm going to steamroll through this game. And then the first treachery that flips is caught off guard, so I had to throw one.
Always the
So,
way. Always the way.
yeah, it was very unfortunate.
The other thing I've noticed that Daredevil helps with and brings to the table is him being able to deal that extra point of damage.
Correct.
Him
Good
being
for
able to.
knocking off toughs.
It's for me. The thing I did notice is that early on in the campaign versus your crossbones and your absorbing man, you do have the Hydra Patrol modular set involved, and you've got those 4 HP guard minions, which Hulk doesn't naturally deal with based off his 3 attack or even Thunderclap. Just doesn't. So having that extra point to be able to, as you said, knock off tough or be able to deal that 4th damage efficiently to hit those, because those guard minions are stopping him from going over the top and just
Correct.
rushing down. So I mean, Daredevil, as much as 4 resources makes him seem incompatible with Hulk, you kind of need him.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, with the helicarriers and with the enhanced physiques, you can get them out there. And then you'll notice I put some honorary Avengers in there. It was a little bit to subsidize Hulk's hit points and to try to swing through the deck a little faster. But a lot of times, if I had one and I'd already played Daredevil, then I would put an honorary Avenger on him and get another turn out of him. Hulk's got a big enough pool of hit points; he can often just take a lot of those hits on the chin and keep going. In particular, if you have what's the one immovable object out, because now you get retaliate. You've got 22 hit points, so you go for quite a while. The other place where Hulk clashes a bit with Justice is Boundless Rage. So Boundless Rage is the one where you get +1 strength, which is huge for Hulk, bringing him up to 4, because like you said, now you can take out those guard minions with 1 hit. But Justice often relies on swinging back to alter ego mode to operate every few rounds. It kind of goes hand in hand, which is why you'll see a lot of the big Justice users are going to be people like She-Hulk that want to flip back and forth. I think the new Ant-Man and Wasp that come out, flipping around and being able to flip down and having cards that take advantage of all those sorts of things are probably going to be both Justice wielders. In particular, Wasp, because she's got all the mental resource synergies. But yeah, with Hulk, it's detrimental because you have to discard Boundless Rage as soon as you flip down. So really, what the concussive blows end up doing when you do whip them out is it just saves you from advances, the treachery card advance. So he's not scheming there, and which is still nice because it knocks out that extra threat that would come out, but it's not quite as effective as you want it to be. If you've got the Banner's Laboratory out, it's not as bad because what his recovery goes up to 6 at that stage, right?
That's
So
correct.
you can recover fast. You get the free resource. He does have the card draw and then discard, so you can kind of come back into it with the best hand you could possibly get. But you just lost Boundless Rage, so you're already coming back a little hamstrung. So it's a little unfortunate. I think the only thing left to cover with Hulk really is make sure anytime you're trying to Hulk, and this goes for all aspects, make sure you put Lockjaw in there because you're going to have some dead hands. You're going to have some times where you draw, both limitless strengths. I don't do any of the double resources, the ones from the basic cards, except for the strength one, because it just can gum up your hand too much. But even with that, you'll get bad draws. You'll get that second helicarrier after you already had one out, and one of the limitless strengths plus a strength plus a power of justice, and like that's what you've got. And with Lockjaw, you save the turn because you can just play him out of the discard pile. He comes in for 4. He can thwart for 2, attack for 2, whatever you need him to do that turn. He can take a shot for you, right? If you're going to get swung at. And the other thing Lockjaw can do, if you can bring him out and you thwart and you get that thwart down low enough, it's now safe to flip Hulk. In particular, if you already use the concussive blow and take a turn and go ahead and try to utilize some of that excessive resources that you drew into on some more useful cards. So my verdict on this one is it's not quite ready yet. I think that will change after the Wasp pack comes out.
Yeah, I definitely feel that if Hulk didn't have that reliance on physical resources, which I get because it's flavorful, but if he didn't have that, Justice would actually kind of help shore up enough of his weaknesses to make it a viable deck. But the problem is that you just can't play a lot of the stuff you'd like to, because otherwise, if you are going to see that his showcase cards are going to be infinitely weaker for it. You're not going to hit those kickers. You're not going to be able to play cards, and it causes its own sort of problems. The concussive blow is really nice, being able to kind of flip back. And although you might lose your Boundless Rage, which is, for me, I count on not having it as much as having it. You do get
And
that
it is
opportunity
cheap to bring it back out.
Yeah, and you do get that. It does, going back to Alter Ego, does give you that opportunity to do what you can't do in Hero, which is to be able to keep cards in hand and plan for a future turn. For me, where I would be continuing to experiment and play with this deck is actually trying out the deck, but bringing in some house rules regarding Hulk. So maybe trying him out, seeing if playing the deck with his limitation of having to discard your hand at the end of the turn in hero mode. If I take that away, how much is the deck suddenly a lot more balanced, a lot more enjoyable to play if I make his hero hand size 5 and 6 on the banner side? Does that help things, or does the deck just suddenly get too good at that point? I think for me, it might, until we get more cards, I might be trying to house rule Hulk to be a little more balanced, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have house ruled Hulk, especially in solo mode. Once you go into multiplayer, the consensus is, in particular with 3, he does add a lot to the team because
Yeah,
other people can feed
absolutely.
him cards, other people can do stuff. Um, you feed a card to Hulk, like with Captain Marvel has card draw where she can have anyone draw a card with their alter ego mode, right? She feeds that card to Hulk, and he's getting more mileage out of it than anybody else on the table. So it is kind of a consensus that once you get to those higher player counts, Hulk does start to not only be valuable but be an asset to a team. Um, uh, so yeah, I mean, I'm not a house rule guy, so I don't necessarily have an opinion either which way on what to do. But like I said, I will say when Wasp comes out, that should be a big boost because I know we're joking around about the basic deck. Hulk is probably going to be the guy that switches with those power within all of us cards that are going to come out. Sorry for spoilers if anyone's trying to avoid it, but basically the basic is getting a power of card just like all the aspects have. Hulk is going to be the guy that's going to want to use those because he can, team that up with Mockingbird. He teams that up with Lockjaw. There's a basic Spider-Man ally that's coming out. That's really good. He's got a physical resource, exactly what Hulk wants in case you can't play him that turn for whatever reason. And yeah, he's got the right resource, so you use those power ups on him. So he's going to have a lot of good options over on the basic side. And of course, if you got the power ups, then the enhanced physiques come in cheaper. Those come in easier. Helicarrier comes in easier. It's just all these things that Hulk is already kind of wanting to use on the basic side. It just enriches his deck. And so I believe Hulk will probably be like a 15 to 20 basic card build, no matter what aspect you take, with 5 to 10 of the actual colored cards for that aspect. And that's kind of the direction he'll go. And hopefully that fixes it to where you don't have to worry about house rules and you just roll from there. And we mentioned a little bit last time about like a gamma card. Hopefully that comes down the line because I think the 2 people that could use kind of a card that really boosts them are Hulk and She-Hulk, and they both got that gamma trait. So that's something that they'll do it eventually, and hopefully, it's not another aerial where we got all these guys with aerials, but there's just not a lot of synergies for it. Hopefully they do it sooner than later.
Yeah, I'm not a big house rule guy either. I think for me, um, experimenting with the house rules for Hulk just to try and make him a bit better is more just to for me. I'd be experimenting more in the area of game design. I'd be kind of just
Sure.
trying to pick my curiosity and just see whether. I mean, again, it's easier to say this now because, but I think they were developing Hulk fairly early in the development cycle, and they kind of obviously in the context of not being able to see how people were playing the game and how they were making things work. It's obviously easier
You
to
are correct.
underpower it and trying to give him some cards that seem too powerful, but then having to handicap him and handicapping too far. I think it's very easy for them to take that cautious approach with him. Though,
And you can't get rid of his obligation. And if you look at I know I said Cap has the worst Nemesis deck, and he does, all added together. Hulk's
it's
Nemesis
pretty
deck
close.
has 3 boost icons on every single card. So while the cards themselves aren't quite as obnoxious as adding, just that initial blow that Cap takes, right? Everyone's getting gunned down and quick strike from Zemo, and then the guards, doing the thing Hydra soldiers do. But like I said, his are going to just really ramp up how hard the villain's hitting you. So he doesn't have an easy time on that side either. So hopefully, yeah, we just get some cards that just clean him up a bit. And like you said, I think they were messing with them early, and Spider Woman kind of got his thing from what we've been told, got the mechanic that they were originally messing with Hulk to be a dual aspect person because they thought, ooh, you go one on Hulk and you go one with Banner. But it didn't really make sense because they wouldn't have shown up at the same time. So I think that the whole double agent thing worked better with Spider Woman. So it probably landed on a better character to land on.
Oh,
And
absolutely,
we'll
absolutely. The sorry, I've lost my chain of thought here. Yeah, hopefully one day we'll get it to the point where Hulk is quite fun to play because of the card pool and that he's smashing appropriately. Um, One last little thing I wanted to just quickly touch on that's before we move off of Hulk, and I guess this is probably more relevant to Hulk than the other characters we're going to discuss going forward. But
okay.
in the campaign rules, it does state that it does give you free reign to actually make changes to your deck between
Oh,
games
yeah.
to the point where you can even change up the entire aspect. It's basically you're only if to play campaign style, you're only really locked into the character. Um, do you have any thoughts on whether Hulk is whether you are able to kind of tweak the deck between games for Hulk a little bit to better
Yeah.
deal with the later stages of the campaign? Did you, as well as another question?
So I obviously I didn't switch aspects because that wasn't kind of the point of some of this
Oh,
experiment.
of course.
Um, but the so I only mess with it during losses, and that's why if you have questions about a couple of these other decks, I think the answer is I never lost a match with some of these, and that's why they just stayed the way they were. So I'm not sure if there's some better options. But the uh, so I was adjusting things. I can't remember what I would have adjusted. I don't know if interrogation room was in there at the start. I just noticed on some of them, um, minions are popping out, and then I'm busting them up, and it would have been nice to get that extra bonus. So that's how the interrogation room got in there, and I do feel it helped out. If I was switching aspects out, um, being able to kind of set up and do those sorts of things against like absorbing man and taskmaster, maybe justice was the way to go. But when you just got to get out there and just really lay down the law and stay in the fight, with someone like Crossbones, right, is usually a little bit riskier trying to balance in and out because Hulk's never going to be able to fully utilize justice the way you want to with some of the other guys. Then maybe protection or excuse me, aggression is better. Leadership's always kind of funky with Hulk too, just because he doesn't have a lot of the resources to do what you want to do, and uh, it's harder to pull off. It's not impossible, and I know sometimes with Zola in particular, even though he's got the anti-leadership retaliate, sometimes the best way to fight minions that keep coming at you is to throw your own out there and have your own allies just clashing with them. So, um, yeah, I did take the attack. I think um, just being able to smash and draw an extra card with things like crushing blow and unstoppable force and Hulk smash. That there are a lot of times where you can hit something, draw into that extra card on the Red Skull. Once you get to him, but he, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to say because Hulk is still Hulk no matter what aspect you go. He's still going to have that handicapped forehand size, and you can't carry anything over in case you get a whiff turn. So you just gotta throw some things in there to try to prevent. Because I did have a target acquire. We didn't mention that one. The target acquire and the tenacity to try to prevent some of the nonsense that can happen with boosts or stuns or anything like that, and try to get them going that next turn again.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're listening, as always, the deck list we're discussing today will be down in the episode's description. One last,
Yeah,
sorry,
it's a decent base, but yeah, it just needs those basic cards that are coming in a couple months here.
the one thing, actually, sorry, I know I said already last point, but one thing I do feel like sharing is that I did have one game versus Crossbones where I was about to thread out on the following turn and had an encounter card come up that led to me being stunned. So I basically, I think the villain was at about 10 health. So I basically had to, sorry, I should set this up by saying that I had either Avengers Mansion or in play, or either that or Beat Cop and Skilled Investigator. Anyway, I was drawing a card into my turn and I had to basically hope to draw into non-movable object, Unstoppable Force, the one that readies Hulk.
Yeah.
I had to hit that with the kicker to draw into Hulk Smash to win. I had to get the Unstoppable Force to basically be able to shake off the stun, and I Avengers Mansions into Unstoppable Force into Hulk Smash and won the game. So I had no business
Nice.
winning. So I think the poker term is I hit runner. But yeah, that was a very memorable game for me, despite the fact that I
Fantastic.
was kind of in a bad. I had to get lucky to get out of a bad situation because the deck led me down the road of a bad situation. But that was definitely fun. I was kind of trying not to yell out because it was late at night and trying not to wake everyone up with.
That's what the game's all about. It's about those near losses or near wins. You know, that's the optimal level you want to get to. I think Crossbones is widely regarded as a good scenario because there's always a feeling like you may have lost it. You know, even starting on expert. You know, a lot of the best players don't really have to crank it up to heroic to at least sometimes feel the pressure from that one because the way that the main scheme advances fairly easily into the next stage. So yeah, that's what it's all about, man. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, I think with a cooperative card game, it's a little bit easier to kind of enjoy those good beats or bad beats, like the RNG working for you or against you, because you haven't had to go and rock up and spend 8 hours in a tournament venue and put all the all the hours and hours in. It's a little bit more. You're able to enjoy it a little bit more, regardless.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, we're looking at Iron Man leadership. Obviously, immediately jumps out at you is the fact that Iron Man likes the energy resources for the Repulsor Blast card, and you do get a few through Lead from the Front, Avengers Assemble. There's another couple of key cards in there. I think it's Teamwork as well. Aside from that, though, it doesn't kind of help the traditional Iron Man game plan so much as you don't get anything that's going to prevent threat from being added to the scheme because you're in alter ego mode. And it doesn't provide you any kind of in-house aspect tech upgrades like you get in protection. So given all that, how did you approach building Iron Man in leadership? And do you feel it deserves its place as one of the lesser used aspects with Iron Man?
For solo, sure, because of the things you mentioned. It is tough to overcome the fact that you almost always have to sit there in alter ego mode, and if you end up playing the allies quickly, then you're late on your armor, so you have to stay in there for even longer. And even with two thwart allies out there, a couple of them, sometimes they can't keep up with the scheme so that the villain's throwing out there. I also tried to cheat guys in, with Quinjets, on an early build. I still had one in there at the end because it was nice. Excuse me, sorry. It was nice to have a cheap Quinjet that came out early, and then 4 turns later, dropping Goliath in or something. But it just we'll get into Quinjet effectiveness later. But with Iron Man, it was not working out. So I definitely switched over to more relying on make the calls to get who I needed out when I needed them out. Like you said, not only do you get a lot of the key cards in leadership have the energy symbol, which really works with his repulsor blasts. So Iron Man, a lot of games ends up being more offensive focused, where he's the one that's kind of throwing out the offense, and his allies are thwarting and defending for him. There's a lot of science symbols too, mental symbols, which helps you get aerial from your rocket boots when you discard them. So it's really those symbols that you really like on both sides. There's not too many allies that have energy symbols, but that's about to change in what, 10 days or so. So, um, so we're getting there. I think I've said this a few times for a few of these guys, but by the end of this cycle, all these decks are going to be shaped up rather well. But again, it's just going to be risky to play Iron Man solo. Um, so after the campaign, I made sure I played 10 games with everybody. And the very last game I played was against Kang, um, and randomly pulled out the Weapon Master module, but it went like this. I got one armor out on the table. Kang schemed. I flipped the two cards, and they were both advances. So he was going to be scheming 3 times. It was like, okay, the game's over. I can't do anything. That's just going to happen. Where I didn't have any playable allies. I only had one armor out. I might be misremembering that. I think I did have an ally that got out there, but of course they can't, put the main scheme in the negatives, and it wouldn't have mattered because he got both advances. So, but so it's always risky. But that's those are a lot of the times still the fringe losses, so it's still fun, And the nice thing about solo is it's fast. You just reset the board real early. Some of these guys, I played 10 games in a single day, a single evening. So as soon as a loss happened, you just shuffled back up and just kept going. And so he's still fun. I think Iron Man leadership is a blast. Definitely fun multiplayer. And see, I went with the attack upgrade with Iron Man. I think originally I was thinking thwart, but then when I realized, I get that attack up to 2 and really lay out some damage with the fact that he can re-ready with the arc reactor. He was definitely clearing out the table a lot faster and laying a lot more damage into the villain, because he does get 2 attacks minimum a turn. And then of course I put in 3 Earth's Mightiest Heroes. That's got the nice energy symbol. And if Goliath was out, he's the guy who's getting the benefit from it. But if he wasn't, then of course Iron Man was just getting re-readied and was able to do 2 thwart, 2 attack on whatever I needed to that turn.
That is something that I need to draw attention to and discuss with you. The presence of the ability to ready your Avengers, but also with Goliath being in the list. Talk to us about how your games went, whether you found yourself more often winning via the Goliath plan, or whether it was just the suit doing suit things. And did you find that those two game plans clashed at all, or did they work quite well into each other?
Well, I think the best way to build any deck is kind of web things together, right? If you've ever played Commander form for Magic, you understand that you only get one card. You're dealing with a 99 card deck, right? And you only get one copy of any given card, other than the basic resources in that game. And so you get used to making sure that every card can work with something else in a different way. So you're not just relying on one combo, but several combos can manifest. With Earth's Mightiest Heroes, if Goliath's out and the fact that Iron Man can re-ready himself, you can actually throw your ready actions up to Goliath. You can swing him up that way. So Goliath gets to the point where you can play him and swing with him 2-3 times on the same turn you play him. That's a lot harder to pull off with other people. A lot harder to pull off with other people without a Quinjet. So I would say that Iron Man was definitely the more offensive guy, but Goliath definitely had his moments where he went off and was crashing and smashing, just like with anybody else.
The sorry, this is something I'm going to cut. The Board Game Geek list, did it carry separate sections for solo and multiplayer? I forget off the top of my head. Were the statistics universal, or did they take that into account?
Say that again. I'm sorry. What was the question?
So, the Board Game Geek statistics.
Okay.
This list is based on, was it universal, or did it make distinctions between solo and multiplayer?
It does make distinctions between solo and multiplayer, and I'm looking at that right now. So, Iron Man has a 73.8% winning percentage in multiplayer and a 66.4% in solo. He does have one of the harsher shifts, right, where it goes up when you swing over to multiplayer, and even on leadership itself, Iron Man's at 76% win rate multiplayer and 73.8 solo, which that's kind of odd that he has a higher win percentage solo with leadership than he does with justice.
Yeah,
But
that's really weird, right? Because
so,
counterintelligence is worth its weight in gold to Iron
so
Man.
here's the biggest flaw with these number sets. If I'm playing expert with Iron Man solo, I'm probably playing justice. If I'm playing standard, then that's when I might dip down those other things, So when some of the newer players, that don't know these things better. So this is where it can hurt you, because if someone's saying I only play heroic mode on solo, then they could be entering those numbers in and then really tanking someone's performance. So that's why there's a certain subjectivity that you got to still keep, even though you're using it's not factual data, but compiled data from games that people have played. So but just reading it, you know, firsthand, that is a little shocking. And I'm sure if I played 100 games myself on expert with justice and leadership, that justice would definitely pull ahead.
Yeah, the reason I did bring that up initially was because as you mentioned, I can see this deck being a lot more not only effective, but I think it would be a lot more fun as a multiplayer build.
Sure. Yeah, no, definitely. So you're just able to kind of have your own way a little bit more with Iron Man in multiplayer. Period. I can take my time and set up. There's always one thing I want to touch on, though, because I know I got at least one loss because I did this, and I realized it after the game, and I'm always a big advocate to not do these sorts of things. Don't avoid playing cards just because you think they're trash. I did not play War Machine on a turn because you get in your. I don't even necessarily think War Machine is a trash card, at least not to the same extent that other people do. But I didn't play him because I just really wasn't focused on it or thinking about it, and he was the exact right play that I would have needed. That probably would have won the game. I can't remember what I did instead. I just remember looking at the discard pile, seeing him as a resource that got chucked, and then going, you know what? If I played him instead, I would have won that one. But that's kind of the modes you can get into. So I know it's a bit of a meme, that the War Machine in Iron Man's deck's not that good, and it's also just in comparison to the basic Iron Man, or excuse me, War Machine ally, which is regarded as one of the upper echelon allies in the game at this stage, for just being able to absorb a pair of hits, can counter the recent onslaught of retaliating minions and scenario bosses. But that doesn't mean he's inherently the wrong move the turn you get him into hand. He might be exactly what you need. He's still got a good pool of hit points. He's still got a 2 attack. He's still gonna be able to. I mean, I don't think anyone says he's not good on Ultron, because he can wipe the board no problem, and he can do that twice. But yeah, it just always keep that in mind. That just because it might not always be the best move, or it might be a little bit weaker card, that doesn't mean that that particular turn it's not the best move, and it's not the right thing to do. So
I think that
don't sleep on those sorts of things.
I think that point speaks to larger things within the game, both the fact that you will get cards that, though they may appear a bit weaker or underpowered, generally will have really good corner case uses where they are really going to shine and be really brilliant, as you mentioned with War Machine and Ultron. But also that's kind of speaks to being able to have the wherewithal to be able to not only play through games and trying to play through them to the best of your ability, but kind of learning from your mistakes afterwards. Because I
Sure.
think at some point this game the card pool will grow and the scenarios will kind of, there will be scenarios that come out that ramp the difficulty up in order to provide a challenge to players who have kind of got a lot of experience through the game and consider themselves experts at it. And I think
Yeah,
that, you know,
I really hope that those late scenarios in the campaigns that they can really do a lot with those, because eventually what you can do is you can make the campaign functions itself make up that gap. So if when Galaxy's Most Wanted comes out, they could really buff the Milano up to be a real good asset. And at that point, those last 2, 3 scenarios can have an extremely high level of difficulty, because if you're a newer player playing on standard through the campaign, the campaign additives flatten that curve out for you, right? But then the guys who are playing it outside of a campaign who want those big challenges, then that's where they can find them. But not to get too off subject here, I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, a big thing with Iron Man is, because you mentioned Goliath. He's set up to either feed Goliath a bunch, right? So he can do that, but he's also set up because I have the 3 morale boosts in there. I have lead from the fronts in there. The Earth's Mightiest Heroes. He already gets to ready twice. He is a real good candidate just to buff himself and be able to activate obviously the 2 times with the arc reactor, but with the Earth's Mightiest Heroes, you can end up activating him 3, 4 times in a single turn. So he can get a lot of mileage out of that. And again, that's why I went with the attack, because realistically, it wasn't maybe every other turn I was ended up activating with him 3 times at 3 attack, right? So he get a lot of mileage out of his attack and just basic thwarts and things like that, on top of using the gauntlets. So once he got built and going, most games went pretty quickly. It's just sometimes it was tough to get going and getting that board back under control after you spent that 1, possibly 2 turns. If you could get some of those higher thwarting allies like Goliath or Maria Hill played early, they buy you a little bit of time.
yeah, that's it. Is there anything else we should cover in regards to Iron Man leadership before we move on to Ms. Marvel Justice? Is there
No,
anything else you'd
yeah,
like
I
to
think we
mention?
should move on. It's he. I actually really am surprised at that high percentage, because I would not have thought that he would be flying through some of these scenarios quite as easy as they're saying. Because like I said, I was losing off of just the guys getting advanced on the first turn. There's nothing I do.
For me, that's not surprising so much if you're taking into account numbers for scenarios where, so for instance, like Absorbing Man, where you're starting off with one scheme, but it's got a high ceiling of 12. I can see Iron Man leadership doing really, really well there, but like in ones where, for instance, say Ultron, where you've got the first scheme's 3, and I think the second one's like 6 or 7, but then you've got one where you get into a kind of like a countdown phase, or just anything where
Sure.
a couple of schemes is possibly just going to lose you the game. I don't see how leadership should have such a high winning percentage, because as I said,
Oh,
it
sure,
doesn't really
sure.
offer you anything to counteract scheme being added, counteract threat
Well,
being added to the scheme, or being able to advance how quickly you can switch to hero mode.
Well, and like I mentioned last time, I was not playing the modules straight across the board. I kept switching those out. So Iron Man was a victim of some of that switching. I discovered that Absorbing Man, um, the weakest module for him in that box alone is the patrol. So Iron Man had to go up against Absorbing Man 3 times because I switched to Hydra Assault. And let me tell you, there's nothing like getting attacked 3 times by Absorbing Man. So he gets his attack, he flips the Jet Trooper, he gets another attack, and then he flips the Treachery card, he gets the third attack, and you having to figure out somebody to defend, or you keep getting those triggers from the undefended attack from the environment. So there are some ways to, and I'll probably post a thread on this up at Board Game Geek. I'll probably do that this weekend, honestly, and put that up there where, like, hey, here's how you kind of enrich some of these scenarios with modules that gel with these villains a little bit better and can really up the difficulty. And obviously, it all depends on the card draw, but yeah, I mean, both times that I was losing, he was getting those Jet Troopers, giving those extra attacks, which, like I said, now really synergizes with that environment, getting its trigger at the same time. And I was just running out of people, just ran out of guys to throw in front of him.
Yeah, that Absorbing Man probably a poor example on my part, because obviously, yeah, 12 is high in theory, but it doesn't end up being that high when you factor in.
No, it's a good example. No, I like I said, the only reason why I was because I switched out that module. But you do want to take advantage of that when you're playing Iron Man. If you see that they have a 10 plus main scheme, do not be afraid to try to ride that as long as you can, and get, regardless of aspect that you're playing, get an ally out there and just thread a little bit, even if it's just a 1, and give yourselves a couple turns. Because if you can get 4 pieces of armor, you can usually do okay and flip the hero mode and start going.
On Iron Man generally, I think the most interesting thing to see for him going forward, regardless of aspect, is whether we will see more tech upgrades getting printed within aspects, or even within basic, or whether his power level is something that's going to cause them to hesitate when making things that get that tech upgrade status, even if it flavorfully should see it. So,
well, they also have the ability to counter stuff via the encounter deck, and I was really happy to see another spoiler. I'm sorry for those that want to keep certain things hidden, but it's going to be out in a couple weeks. Anyways, so the Ant-Man deck is going to have the side scheme that comes with his Nemesis blanks all tech cards, and so you can literally, if you're playing with Ant-Man, with Iron Man, and your hit point pool is you're doing a little rough on hit points, and Shadows of the Past pops on him, it could kill you immediately, or knock you out, I guess is a nicer term for it, because it will blank your rocket boots, it blanks your Mark V armor, and you drop 8 hit points immediately.
Shuts off his life support.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I'm having a bit of a chuckle about the rich old Tony Stark just having to, hasn't paid his electricity bill when his stuff goes down, his life support goes off, and he just kicks the bucket.
Yeah, so a tech thief comes out there and steals the stuff.
So next up, we've got Ms. Marvel Justice, and this is probably the first of a couple of confessions during this episode, but I have not played a lot of Ms. Marvel in any aspect, to be honest. And I think part of it's because I've kind of been spending time on other characters that are less likely to get more interesting in future. Whereas Ms. Marvel, I think I've kind of told myself that it's okay to play her a little bit later on when there's more of a card pool, so I can build her a little bit more toolbox and kind of make use of her specific abilities and tool set a bit better.
Well, that makes sense, but I can tell you that Ms. Marvel Justice is already there. I think more than any other set that she has. I know her numbers are a little shoddy solo, and some of that's just because she's confusing. She's got 1s down the line for all her stats. But honestly, you're not using her to attack anyways.
She's also not an Avenger.
She's not an Avenger, so she doesn't. That is correct. She does not synergize a lot of the cards that have come out, and I don't know how hard they'll push champion synergy. There'll always be some, but it might be a little lighter than obviously the bigger teams like Avengers or X-Men.
It's
But
super weird though, like seeing all the marketing regarding the Square Enix Avengers video game, and she's front and center and very much the kind of the main protagonist of the actual story mode, and so
sure.
she's very much like Avengers obsessed. And then I, it was when I looked this morning, and it just totally slipped my mind that she actually doesn't have that Avengers um, as trait. Oh, and also the fact that her card pool came with I think Honorary Avenger is came with her card pool as well, but she
That is correct.
can't actually play it without having.
Or no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. It came with no. That came with Captain America.
Oh, okay, my bad, my bad. But it
She's
does
just
feature
she's
it
just on the
features her on
card.
it. Yeah, okay. So
Correct.
again, it's
Which makes sense because it's like Cap is making her an Avenger. So you can make her an Avenger if you're playing multiplayer. You can get that on her, and then she gets the trait. And I don't think there's anything stopping you from putting cards in there that synergize with it, as long as somebody's giving that to you. So because that card exists, you can always make anybody at the table an Avenger, and they can always use those Avenger cards. So that's something to keep in mind if you are playing multiplayer and dipping into that side of things. But with her, right, she's already got the perfect toolkit for Justice, so go for it if you're thinking about it. The two big cards for her are going to be Clear the Area and Stealth Strike. So she has a pair of kit cards. One is called Shrink, where it's a hero interrupt that when you play a thwart event, exhaust Shrink, increase the amount of threat that event removes by 2. So if you're playing that with Clear the Area, where if you remove all the threat off a scheme, then you draw a card. So Shrink gives you a lot bigger leeway of how much threat can be on that scheme to still get the trigger off of that. And not to mention paying 2 effective resources, right, to clear the area itself in just 1, to go for 4, even if you don't clear all the threat off the scheme, that's still a phenomenal amount. But most of the time it's going to be effective resource cost of 1 to clear 4 in whatever side scheme, or or bring the main scheme down to nothing. So the other one, Stealth Strike, which is a card that deal 4 damage to an enemy. If that enemy is defeated by this attack, remove 2 threat from a scheme. So you have to defeat an enemy, and then you can remove 2 threat from the scheme. Right, but it is 4 damage. There's plenty of minions that are going to have more than that. But she has another card similar to Shrink called Embiggen, where when you play an attack event, exhaust Embiggen and increase the amount of damage that an event deals by 2. So now you get a 6 ceiling on Stealth Strike to be able to hit something. And at that stage, Stealth Strike is performing a similar damage point to a lot of the signature cards and other people's kits. So it's doing a lot of damage. You also need to flip a lot with Ms. Marvel. And of course, Justice has Concussive Blow, which is beautiful. It came in her deck, so there's no way you don't have it. If you own Ms. Marvel, you own Concussive Blow. So you might not own some of the other ones like Clear the Area or Stealth Strike, but you do own Concussive Blow. I think at the end of the day, it's probably the most pivotal one to have, because you're able to use it, confuse the villain, and because you're going to want to flip back and forth, so you can use all these great cards like Amir Khan, Nakia Bahadir. You can use all those, what are they called? Personas, right? Persona support cards. You want to, it's almost every other turn you're flipping back and forth to get full usage out of all her stuff on the table. So it's a very good card to be able to knock out that scheme that the villain's going to do every other turn. And her signature ally, when he's defeated, you can spend 2 resources and you do 2 damage to an enemy, and you can pull him back to your hand. So you can use him to just constantly, consistently defend for you as well. So between those 2 cards, Concussive Blow, having a trio of those in there, and Red Dagger, you can pretty much cover both sides of it, of being able to avoid the hit in hero mode and avoid the scheme in alter ego mode. So it's just going every other turn. You got it covered.
In regards to concussive blow, the wording of concussive blow with the embiggen um, upgrade as well, I'm fairly sure that you can actually embiggen if you hit the kicker. I don't think you can embiggen to have it deal 2 damage if you don't hit the kicker.
That is correct. So yeah, because embiggen is increase the amount of damage. So you have to increase damage. It's if there's no damage to increase, I do not believe you can. That you can look it up. We may be wrong on this one. Anyone who's listening, but I am almost positive if you did not do an amount of damage, then you cannot increase it. So that's not something where you get to just randomly up it. But I mean, I could be wrong because it is an attack event, right? So if the attack event has a damage of 0, you still might be able to do 2.
That's where the confusion is for me, like because 0 increasing 0 by 2 is 2. So I've got a feeling though it wants to. I've got a feeling it wants you to actually deal that 3 damage. But obviously, kicking that off and then being able to deal 5 damage to a target is on top of that is obviously incredible value.
Yeah, and I don't know if it matters too much because now that I'm looking at it, because it does say attack event, exhaust this, increase the amount of damage the event does by 2. It does make sense that you could increase 0 damage up to 2. I would have looked it up if I ran into that problem, but I never did because she has biokinetic polymer suit, right? Exhaust it and generate a wild resource for an event. So anytime she was using it, if I didn't have one in my hand, I would have made sure I used that and had it. So there was no time that I was not getting the damage out of it. So it's nothing to worry about.
But for me, yeah, it was just kind of an interesting wording. What I will do is I will put that to the community, and if I can get a solid answer, I will pop that in the description of the episode. Again, as you mentioned, it's probably not often going to come up, but it's just an interesting wording interaction that's kind of got
correct.
me.
Yeah, but yeah, now rereading it, it actually does look like a yes. Sometimes you just got to read it a couple times and go like, oh yeah, no, that would make sense. It's an attack event, add 2 damage. Just like the other piece of the kicker is saying to add 3 damage or deal 3 damage. Isn't that, what does it say? Deal 3 damage versus add. But adding 2 to 0 seems like you're still increase.
It makes sense flavor wise as well, because it's just like she's punching you in the head and increasing the size of her fist to make it hurt a little bit more. So it does kind of work flavorfully as well. But as I said, if I was a betting man, I'd be putting my money heavily on the fact that it doesn't work. But I think there's enough ambiguity there for me to be worth me asking the rules gurus.
And most of the comebacks have generally been, if it doesn't break anything or doesn't seem like out of sorts, then the answer has been yes more often than not on some of these. So but play it safe however you want to, and but yeah, I doubt you'll be having that issue very often. I put a pair of beat cops in with there too. Those really helped out. I pretty much always got them out. I did have longer matches with her because it does take her a while just to flip back and forth. Recovery upgrade, if you're going through the campaign, make sure you give her the recovery upgrade. She already has a recovery of 5. She only has 10 hit points. Getting her hit points up to 14. You're swinging down every other turn. So being able to recover for 6 when you need it and draw that extra card in the final scenario against Red Skull is easy to do. With her, I went 8-2, so I had plenty of success, and I honestly I can't even tell you much about those 2 losses because it's one of those like, man, how did I lose? So it was probably just a string of unfortunate events that came up on those. And I try to play about as clean a game as I can, especially solo. I would prefer to challenge myself. So if I play several things and I figure out that, oh, I could have played that a little bit better, I let it lie. I try to make myself play it well the first time, and that's not including if I'm throwing things in the discard pile and trying, like, running through it in my mind, right? And then I something is then coming up while I'm trying to figure it out. Of course, I throw that in, like, okay, and then I could have done this, and then okay, boom, but yeah, once I kind of finish things up and sweep all those events off the board and throw everything into that discard pile, then I let it lie. It's just more challenging, and I like it that way. But I know it's pretty common for people to retcon their moves, and I'm not going to dog you for it, uh, but I do feel like the games is kind of easy enough to where it's not always necessary. It's nice to get that extra layer of challenge to make you live with the consequences, I guess to say. You are playing Justice 2 here, so Agent Coulson is great in most of these decks to be able to get those counterintelligences up. Again, you're flipping the alter ego. He's going to scheme a lot. So between the concussive blows and counterintelligence, these great floors like thwarters like Agent Coulson, Daredevil, Red Dagger himself's got it too. Quake in case any of those freaking minions are out there to blast them. She really does have all the tools she needs at this point. And under surveillance, I can't remember what set that came in. I would say Thor. Yeah, well, so Thor's kind of a set you want to buy anyways, no matter what you're playing. But under surveillance just makes those low threshold scenarios so much more manageable, whether it's like a rhino scenario where it starts at 7, or it's one of these like tiered scenarios like Ultron or Crossbones. So because you are going to deal with Crossbones on this one, so being able to get that 4 extra when you're going against it solo, to where even on that first one where it starts at 3, to pop that all the way up to 7, man, just a lot more leeway of what's going on there. So Miss Marvel's really good. Uh, Again, just remember, just ignore her stats of 1s, because you're not actually attacking or thwarting or defending with her. You're going to use that whatever it's called, morphogenetics, something like that, I think is what it's called. To where after you play a event, then you pop that event back into your hand. You don't have to do the first one too. So if you stealth strike and blast something for a lot of damage and clear it off, you can always pull like a lesser one back into your hand if that's going to be the better one to do that you played later. The other thing that people kind of write Ms. Marvel off for is because she is one of the better, I think, overall design characters, because they definitely took into account like the shrink and the embiggen. So you'll see the big hands is not the best card uh, for a superpower. You'll see sneak by is not the best card for a hero thwart. It's actually weaker, right? Sneak by is weaker than for justice. It's the same cost, except it doesn't have the kicker associated. But again, she supplies her own kicker. And but she has all that fun. Those are just fillers to make sure that you have a thwart and you have an attack. Really lets her just go any which way you want to. And she also has 2 great defense cards where if you're about to take damage, you prevent 3 and you draw a card. And those cost 0. You just throw those out, whenever you want to. And you can always pull those back into your hand if you know you're going to take another attack or something. You can pull that one in with your morphogenetics as well, because it's a defense card. So she's solid, and I think with again, it's not to sound like a broken record, but with these hero packs coming out, aggression is going to be getting a huge boost. That's going to get solid, and leadership is getting an attack event here with the ant, or it's not the Ant-Man pack. It's actually it's one later on in the cycle. It's one of the off aspect cards. So we're going to get an attack event with leadership. So leadership will actually become a lot more functional with Ms. Marvel.
Yeah, we are kind of cheating a little bit here, talking about the stuff to come in regards to currently beating the Red Skull campaign, but it's with a character like Miss Marvel that has an interesting design that just lends itself so well to becoming more and more nuanced and more interesting as the game grows. Um, it's hard not to kind of be thinking about all the future possibilities with her.
Sure.
And it's also just really good that we have a character like Miss Marvel in the game, like setting aside the whole diversity factor of having a female hero of non-Christian faith, but also just having a character who's not kind of getting turned sideways and having its attack subtracted from the villain's hit pool. The fact that she plays very differently and she's not actually reliant on her basic stats, having her play. She really does play entirely different to anything else we've got in the game so far. And the fact that
Yeah.
her stats don't really come into it; they could be blank, and she'd probably be almost just as good, really.
Yeah,
Also,
I agree. It's that full diversity, not just a palette swap.
yeah, and I think also tying into that again, the diversity, but also how well Miss Marvel is going to age going forward in the game is the fact that, especially as you mentioned, Injustice with having Beat Cop, which is also a persona, but then having Nadia. Sorry, I'm terrible with these names. Bruno Corelli and Nakia Badia and what's her dad's name? I'm probably butchering these names horribly, by the way.
Amir Khan.
Amir Khan, of course, yes. Which sounds like more like a cricketer's name than the other one. So that should probably be the one that I'm remembering. But there you go. I think if and I genuinely hope that personas do provide some support for personas. I think that'd be a very interesting path for the game to take. That it's suddenly not just about the heroes, but also the people in their lives that are protecting and potentially vulnerable.
Well, get ready too, because I think the good money's on. We've talked about it before, and mentioned again that allies and personas are kind of the above curve cards right now. They're a little overtuned, and so that they might also start being targeted a little bit more as well from those encounter decks.
I mean, bring that on though, like in terms of negative
Absolutely.
effects targeting them, but also
Bring it on.
them getting a bit of synergy, like maybe getting cards that may bring back a persona from the discard pile to back into your hand,
Correct.
back into play, like having that a persona as a trait being developed further in future.
Yeah, because with more hate coming from the encounter deck to certain aspects of the game, and I mean that with I should say facets to to not confuse wording, but yeah, if you have that hate coming from certain facets of the game, and a lot of us who've been playing Magic for a long time can testify that when the color targeting went away from Magic, it kind of lost something, and they've had to put a lot more cards on ban lists for tournaments, and it's part of the reason why I don't play it anymore, because you could always sideboard that stuff. So it's always a good to have both sides of it, things that are specifically targeting and punishing you if you're using that, because then you're also able to throw in things that can excel them and propel them to a higher level to now deal with that opposition. So it's good when those things happen. So it's coming. We know it's coming because we've seen a spoiler from the Guardians Most Wanted box. The only thing we know about it actually says that, hey, I might punish allies a little bit more than your average scenario. So But yeah, we won't talk about that.
Yeah, it's I really do like the idea of the villains kind of going, well, I'm not having so much success versus you, so I'm going to start targeting all your teammates and the people that you love as well, and civilians. I think that's, as a design space, then being able to work personas, cards that affect personas and allies positively, but also negatively as well. I think it's a
Very
great
comic booky
design
too,
space for them.
as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Like that's a
absolutely,
very comic
yes.
book thing to do.
I mean, even Superman, like the oldest of the major recognized heroes, it was always a case of like, I can't give my identity away because people are just going to basically kill everyone that's ever known me as well. So it is a very very old comic book trope. Um, just quickly, still touching on the personas. Did you find that you were getting a lot of use out of Bruno Corelli specifically?
Um, yeah. So one of the nice things about him is you can save cards for later. But so Bruno Corelli, right? Alter ego action, exhaust. Bruno Corelli attached one card from your hand face down here. So it was a good way to clean up your hand late, as opposed you don't have to discard as often. Uh, Stick them under there, and then if you either A, have an opportunity to use that card and be really useful, or B, just keep saving them because uh, action exhaust Bruno Corelli add up to 3 cards attached here to your hand. So you can have huge turns that way. And that action can be used in either hero form or alter ego form. So being able to have, you know, upwards of 11 cards, I believe, if you add up all her kit stuff, and being able to get 11 cards hand right to start the gate is pretty big. You obviously have to work for it. You obviously have to sacrifice a little bit on other turns, but yeah, Bruno Corelli is great. Amir Khan is great because it lets you recycle cards and get the ones you want again. And don't forget to exhaust Nakia Bahadir right before you switch back over to hero mode and get that reduction on that first card you're playing to swing out at the gate.
Beautiful. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on with Miss Marvel?
No, I think we covered it. Like I said, Justice is definitely our best aspect. Solo multiplayer. It's odd. It's been lightly played. I think people just have fun with aggression, but Justice it's there. You already have all the cards you need. It's obviously only going to get better. But boom, have fun.
Cool. So next up, we've got She-Hulk Protection. Now, She-Hulk Protection, I think She-Hulk gets a bad rap overall. I really, really like a lot of the cards in her hero kit. She has some very, very cool effects that are, are definitely powerful, in a vacuum, but also will probably get better once the card pool advances as well. Um,
Yeah.
her She does get access to a bit of thwart, but it's reasonably jumping through some hoops for it, or it's expensive in the case of legal practice, where you're having to pitch cards for per threat, which is obviously not terribly effective. Um, Run us through how you approached building this, and how you overcame the threat problem as well.
Well, the big one for her, I don't think is so much the legal practice. That is kind of a oh crap scenario, and I've used it occasionally. Usually, if it's just to really uh, nuke a side scheme, but superhuman law division is the big one. That's the one that sits out there. You exhaust it and spend a mental resource, and you move 2 threat from a scheme. So she also has the I object. So it's a interrupt that on her alter ego side, where she gets to prevent one uh, threat from being placed on a scheme. So that can take care of that turns threat, and then as long as you've got it on a manageable level, then the superhuman law division can step in and take care of another chunk if you were in alter ego mode. So one of Protection's biggest weaknesses is just really struggling to keep threat under control. It's real hard to get over to alter ego mode. That's not as much of an issue for her. With that said, going back to the spreadsheet, She-Hulk protection is the lowest percentage out of anybody for any aspect hero combination. It was at 30% when I started, but luckily I was able to increase that percentage a little bit, only a little bit though. I ended up going 5-5 with her. I did win the campaign with her as well, but of course it was just struggling sometimes. Some of these that you would think are pretty easy to get through with other characters, other aspect combinations. She's even getting losses on those. But the big thing that I did, having She-Hulk who starts with a defensive 2, right? So that's not the worst thing in the world, and she has that attack of 3. I wanted to utilize that, but in order to use a card called Counterpunch that says after your hero defends against an enemy attack, deal damage to that enemy equal to your hero's attack. So that's 3 damage for a 0-cost card, but I have to defend. So you team that up with Indomitable, which makes it to where after your hero defends, discard Indomitable, render your hero. So it was definitely more opportunistic blocking or defending, I should say. But when I was able to, I could get those Indomitables down. I could stage those Indomitables. The nice thing about her is that she's able to sit there in alter ego mode because of the superhuman law division, right? And because of her eye object, it's really easy for her to set up for a couple turns and to get something going before she swings over and goes to Pound Town. Originally, I believe I tried a Avengers angle, but there's only one Protection Avenger. I don't know if that's going to ever change or change significantly. It looks like leadership and aggression are the 2 aspects the Avengers allies are flooding to. I think that's flavorful. I think that's probably what we're going to continue to see. So it's going to be slim pickings. Even 10 years from now, it's probably still going to be slim pickings as far as maybe the number will go from Brother Voodoo, joined by like 2 other guys. And so you'll be forced into the same folks. So the Earth's Mightiest Heroes and re-readying her to get maximum usage out of that 3 attack, or if she got stunned or exhausted on the villain turn, just wasn't really working. So I reprogrammed it a little bit and instead, put the Mockingbird in there so I could get stuns myself, keep them in there, which then, of course, teamed up with superhuman strength. So it was fairly often I could keep stuns on there. And if they weren't stunned and they were swinging at me, so I did use Get Behind Me to take care of treacheries. Because with a 3 defense after a armor vest, it was pretty easy to be able to defend with those Indomitables and re-ready up. Preemptive Strike, made sure I had those in there, so even if I wasn't defending, I could kind of keep that damage under control. And she's got a great card in Gamma Slam to where if I am taking some damage and going down a little bit, it's okay. I can afford it. And I think the Night Nurse, which came in the Doctor Strange pack, kind of shores up her biggest weakness that she had in this aspect pairing, or just her biggest weakness, period. I don't know if it pushes this aspect over some of the others yet, which I doubt it. And I think her style leans towards some of the others, period. But the Night Nurse is able to clear those stuns and confuses on you, and also healing you for 1. And she gets 3 of those counters out there. So I think it's a pretty vital card to have. Anytime you're playing these guys that get overly clocked by stun and confused, that the Night Nurse is an auto include if you're playing protection.
Yeah, and I think the inclusion of Get Behind Me to cancel treacheries. I think specifically being able to nuke and advance is really handy because you want to kind of go back and forth with her, and it's with protection, obviously being able to prevent that damage if she is chilling in hero mode for a couple of turns. Being able to stop the advance from hitting you up in the while you're in hero mode, and kind of keep that threat a bit more under control is really, really handy. And I think that might be part of why we're not seeing her a lot with protection, because of the threat control does her threat control is alter ego based largely, and so
Yep.
therefore it doesn't kind of tie so much into protections want to be able to chill in hero mode and be able to deal with incoming damage so much, but also the fact that I think people automatically feel that she should be taking a lot of hits and trying to get a lot of mileage out of Gamma Slam, which I obviously agree with to a point, but I think that it's to just miss one aspect because you've got one card in your hero kit that may seem to be less effective with it. Is a bit crazy, especially when you've got like the focused rage where you can kind of control you can control how quickly Gamma Slam's effectiveness ramps up.
Well, one thing you can do with the campaign as well is she's one of the characters that can get usage out of having low hit points carry into the next stage, right? So if you're playing the expert campaign, you jot down your hit points at the end of each after you get a win, and you roll with that many hit points on the next scenario. So if I'm going to the next scenario with 4 hit points and I draw a Gamma Slam early, that's an 11 damage card out the gate. So like you can use that to your advantage, and I definitely did a couple times. Was able to bring that in and just rock the villain right off the bat and put him in a real nasty position. I did go with thwart on her. I was kind of torn on it. I thought about going recovery because then you get the recovery 6 and you can really like play off that Gamma Slam, right? And then if I don't get it during the opening draw with the mulligan, then I have a 6 recovery and it can do just fine, right? But I went with thwart because when you get to like those 1-2 punch melees where if you draw into a couple of them, then you can flip, do 2 damage, swing for 3, swing for 3, and then the last one instead you thwart for 2. And the other reason I went with thwart is I just don't think I could have beaten Red Skull without being able to get that card draw every single turn, because you had to get rid of those side schemes to keep that scenario under control. So I did. So that was the thing that pushed me over the edge, and it worked out with Hawkeye, because I mentioned that I took the thwart with Hawkeye too. So she has a serviceable deck. One thing to note too is energy barriers. It does not work to. You can redirect the damage from focus rage, but you don't get the card draw.
Yeah, I think that's a cool little interaction regardless, like just being able to get the ping if you desperately need it. But yeah.
Oh, I finished off. Who did I finish off with that? That's how I want to finish off the scenario. I didn't draw the cards. I just threw 2 damage from the 2 focus rages over at somebody. So you can take advantage of it. I'm not saying you should never do it, especially if that's the last turn and you can end it. Always end it if you can end it in that sort of fashion. But yeah, you have to, any of those lead-ins like Captain Marvel, where heal a damage to draw a card, those sorts of things. You have to have the damage dealt to you first in that scenario, or like focus rate. If you don't actually take the damage, then you don't get the card draw. So make sure you're doing those correctly. Same momentum shift. That's why. Which obviously, protection, you're usually out there taking plenty of hits, so it's not it's rare that you're not going to have 2 hit points down. but that's something to remember if you draw into a momentum shift, if you're using it. I didn't use it here with her, um, to yeah, take some damage that villain round if you can afford it. So then you can use the momentum shift next turn.
The deck itself to me just looks like a lot of fun, to be honest. I think there's a lot of potential for it going forward. Um, Split personality is always just an amazingly fun card to play. It feels very unfair.
Yeah, it's real good. And we were talking about homebrew earlier, and I know some of the guys that do the homebrew and the house rules, they put two in there. But I mean, I can tell you why there's not two in there. It's because you
Yeah,
can split personality into another split personality, and then and just go again. So that's why there's not two. If you're wondering why some of these other guys get two of their great cards and she didn't get two of one of hers, it's like that's it. Is that's a little bit much to be able to draw into both on the same on that same turn. So one thing that you can do with her. So this was a solo run. So the deck that you're looking at, if you follow that link in the description, is She-Hulk has an emerging protection deck where she can stay in alter ego mode the vast majority of the match. And what you end up doing is there's a card called Second Wind. It's a big heal for 3. And it heals 4 from an identity card. And if you get a mental kicker, it heals 5. So it's a large heal that you can sit there and use it in alter ego mode to heal the other guys. It has the exact resource that you're wanting for superhuman law division, right? To ping off of that. And so she does have a protection build, like Brother Voodoo, so you can still get him out there, and it pulls that card for you. You can throw a med team. Yeah, I didn't have any med teams in her deck because I wanted to get her life down. But if you're playing that multiplayer route, you get the med teams in there. So there's just a couple things it might be missing. I don't maybe it's not missing anything, but it just feels like it could get capped off with something probably. But it's pretty much there. To be able to just sit there in alter ego mode, I object the whole time, superhuman law division the whole time, and only swing into hero mode when you need to. Really, what you can do is you can wait for that split personality to show up at that stage, flip into hero mode, do a couple things, and then use the split personality to flip back into alter ego mode, and drop 6 more cards and keep going. So it's like I said, it's a real viable build. She's the other one that could use something like that is probably Captain Marvel, because she can feed cards to other people, and she's got those energy channels that can kind of build up the energy and sit there until you're ready to swing over for one turn, blast them off, and then swing back and get back to flipping cards all over the place. So it is interesting that alter ego, like stay in alter ego mode most of the game. Protection builds are right on the horizon.
yeah, I'm glad that's a thing. I think that's kind of cool that there will be people in future building decks that are just like, I can't be stuffed with superhero life. I'm just gonna chill here as a regular civilian and just do some stuff. I think that's cool, and I'm sure that there will be a hero at some point down the line that basically leans into wanting to stay into alter ego most of the time. I'm not sure. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who it works for super flavorfully, but the
Maybe Professor X or something.
yeah,
It'd be
actually, well, yeah, Professor X will probably be indivisible from his, because I mean, what does he do? He doesn't stop being a wheelchair bound super psychic. Like, yeah, so that's going ahead into the future. The other thing that you bring up, the cheesiness you can do with the early Gamma Slam, like, kind of almost makes you want to build a deck based around trying to cheese out Gamma Slam early in the campaign. So just stacking the deck with a whole bunch of copies of Endurance and honorary Avenger, and just trying to dig for the Gamma Slam and try and take the hero out with the Furious first stage out with a giant Gamma Slam early on.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that they'll once we get some options in the future,
Yeah,
I'm sure
with
there'll be a deck that can do it.
well, anytime you have that Gamma Slam in there too, just the fact that it's there, you always want to have at least one endurance in a She-Hulk deck, honestly, because that way you have that buffer of hit points. Because the way Gamma Slam works is it does uh, fifth, up to 15 damage, right? Or deal X damage to an enemy, where X is the amount of damage you have sustained. So she has 15 hit points, so she can't get to that max level until she increases her hit points. So yeah, endurance is a need to go to card. I didn't have the honorary Avengers in here. I guess I'm slightly surprised because I mean I could have expanded. I see I didn't even think of that, and maybe it's because I just wasn't getting enough mileage out of the Earth's Mightiest Heroes as I was using those other guys, and that's why I just pulled it completely. But to have those honorary Avengers and not only pad my own hit points, but get them on other guys to use the Earth's Mightiest. But it just, like I said, it just wasn't working out. So I don't think making that shift and change and trying to make some other folks into Avengers would have made a difference, especially with people like Clea, right? I always had Clea in there because the nice thing is she shuffles back into your deck, so she's real quick to get out there, thwart for one, take the blow, and she pads my deck to where I'm not decking out as fast and getting extra encounter cards.
Just before we move on to the next one, which is Spider-Man Aggression, do you have any overall play tips for people looking to build or build or play She-Hulk protection?
Like I said, don't be too afraid to try for a blocking defense style. With those Indomitables, it opens it up. Desperate Defenses is obviously another choice that you can go with.
Unflappable.
I
And
did not go with that route just because I like the counter punch, but that could be an angle you try. Um, I just anytime I have a power of 3 or higher, I'm always going to try to use counter punch to get that extra damage out. Because don't forget, if for some weird reason you draw into all 3 counter punches in the same turn, you can use all 3 on the same defense. So busting out 9 damage for 3 cards, I mean that's about as good as you can get on any card in the game. So yeah,
yeah, it
don't be
feels
afraid to
good.
defend.
Would feel good doing 9 damage in the villain's turn until you gets back to your turn and you realize you've got nothing to do this turn apart from attack from another 3. So
Hey, it was
yeah,
worth it.
absolutely. There you have it. That wraps up part 3 of our Rise of Red Skull Mega Primer. Stay tuned in the next few days for our 4th and final part. Thanks once again for tuning in to Across the 616. Bye for now.